Hi, this is Brian Clue with AnandTech, and we're looking at right now is the HTC Thunderbolt. So this is the world's first 4G LTE smartphone, and it's on Verizon. So before we delve into all the interesting 4G LTE stuff, let's do some physical comparisons. So as I mentioned, this is a 4.3-inch smartphone, so it's got a 4.3-inch diagonal display. Of course, it's 800 by 480, so that's sort of the standard higher resolution class for Android. Of course, there's another class that's starting to appear, which is QHD, but that's not an official display resolution yet. So yeah, this is a LCD display as well. So really, the HTC Thunderbolt shares a lot of design language with HTC's other products. Probably most notably and physically similar is the Desire HD or the Inspire 4G. I have the Inspire 4G, but it's essentially the same phone. So you can see between the two there's a lot of the same design language. You have the same style capacitive buttons, the same exact display, the same sort of speaker grill here with that chrome outside and the sort of mesh grill. And then both of them have a recessed LED light, which is a little bit hard to see and has drawn a little bit of criticism, I think is rightfully deserved. But essentially, it's the same outline, same size almost, at least in this sort of outline form shape. In terms of thickness, though, there's a big difference. So you can see that the Thunderbolt is quite a bit thicker. It is one beefy phone in terms of thickness, and then you can, of course, compare it to the iPhone 4 or Nexus One, and really, it's just a beefy phone. So I mean, it sort of harkens back to really, really big 3G phones like the Apache. At least for me, it conjures that memory where you had something really substantial in your pocket that you weren't going to forget about anytime soon. So let's talk about the back side. Let's get these two over. Of course, they share the same 8-megapixel camera. Dual LED flash. The speakerphone for the Inspire is up here. Speakerphone on the Thunderbolt is under the kickstand. So as a result, when you have the kickstand closed, voice, on speakerphone is a little bit muted. It's noticeable. It's not game breaking. It's not a huge problem, but basically opening the speaker, the kickstand, affords you a noticeable improvement in audio quality. The other big difference is that the Inspire 4G Desire HD is all metal. So this is basically the same sort of like gold metal that they used on the Nexus One right here. It's a little bit more purple than it used to be, but the HTC Thunderbolt is entirely plastic. So this whole region, everywhere on the exterior, is entirely plastic. Whereas the Inspire 4G and obviously HTC's newer designs like the Pyramid or the Sensation, whatever it's going by now, are sort of metal unibody. So the Thunderbolt is just plastic, which is a little bit frustrating. I've already dropped this one 2 times at the same spot in Phoenix outside of a cafe, and there's a scuff right here that I sort of put on it and one on the other side right here. So obviously if it was metal, it wouldn't just deform and be a mess, it'd probably be just fine. While I'm griping about build quality things, I think there's some weird coating on the kickstand, and you can already see where sort of this concave part where it becomes flat and it becomes coplanar with the ground when you set it this way, it's already starting to peel off. So that's a little bit disappointing. And likewise, right here on this part, where it comes in contact with the ground when you have it like this, for like watching movies or just browsing, if you can't be bothered to hold it, that really has started to show lots of chipping. I don't know if you can see it, but the same sort of thing, the coating has come off. Those are really my only complaints as far as hardware goes. I don't mind it being thick. I mean, it's just a big phone. Of course, the kickstand works in landscape and portrait, so you can do both like that. That works fine. It's a little bit more stable in landscape. It's obvious they had this in mind. Let's peel off the back. So this whole back area is the battery cover, and it also serves as a place for the antennas to be, or at least 2 antennas. So there is a GPS antenna right here. It's even marked GPS if you look really carefully. And then an antenna for the MDM9600, which serves as LTE transmit, and I believe EVDO transmit. So basically transmit on the MDM9600. And then there's another CDMA antenna down here that's internal, and sort of the spot we're used to seeing the antennas on every smartphone. And that's used for the MSM8655 transmit and receive for the MDM9600. So you get 2x diversity, of course, and MIMO, which is mandated in LTE that way. Interestingly enough, there's also these little four sort of like pogo pins right here. So if you get the extended battery, which comes with a bigger battery door, there's an inductive charging functionality that uses that. I never got the extended battery, but it's essentially double the size, so you get double the battery life. The current battery is 5.15 watt hours. As you can see, yes, yeah, 5.18 watt hours. So this is sort of new for a CDMA or Verizon smartphone. Is of course the USIM is right there, and this is an interesting sort of tray too. It sort of pushes in and then comes out, and it's sort of sideways. That's sort of unique. I've never quite seen that before. Generally, I see a thing where you like slide it in. But yeah, I mean, it works and it's there. Micro SD right here. The Thunderbolt comes with a 32 gigabyte class 4, I believe. Yes, class 4 micro SD. So that's just really generous. I thought I was special with 32 gig micro SD. Now everybody has them, but that's awesome. Last but not least, there's another antenna right here for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. You can't really see. That's sort of the traditional style too. This like sort of flex PCB right here that sort of curves around. So really the thickness of the Thunderbolt is not the battery. It's more just the fact that there are two cellular modems inside. Also, this back cover is really held in place, again, because it does double duty as sort of a place for the antennas to sit. And as a result, they really want it held in place snugly. And you're going to see more of that with HTC's designs. Again, on the Desire HD, sort of the same thing is already happening, both with the SIM card slot. This is doubling as the cellular antenna. So if you yank that off, you're going to lose data. And then the battery card door right here, which is sort of being redesigned because it's very difficult to get on and off, doubles as the Wi-Fi antenna. So, and again, the same sort of, you need to be careful not to just, cup this if you want to ever have Wi-Fi. So yeah, if we give this a second to power on, because I pulled the battery out, we can see the cool HTC Thunderbolt boot low animation and audio, which is a Thunderbolt. So that's the sort of animation which I think kind of ties together with that 4G lightning bolt commercial thing that Verizon had going for a while. So obviously it's clear what they were alluding to. It's the Thunderbolt. So again, the Thunderbolt has HTC Sense. It isn't quite the newest HTC Sense in the sense that, oh, that's ironic, in the sense that it doesn't really have the cloud sync functionality or stuff that the Desire HD has, but it's there, and that's sort of still a philosophical thing, whether or not you like it. It's definitely growing on me, but it's there. So one of the things that a lot of people talked about was that on the Thunderbolt, there's really no way to toggle 4G on and off. So back with the HTC Evo, and other 4G smartphones, at least ones that aren't just HSPA+, there's usually a 4G toggle. So if you go into menu settings, wireless and networks, etc., there really isn't a way to turn, there is no way to turn 4G on and off. I accidentally turned mobile hotspot on. But if you go inside, of course there is a mobile hotspot, yeah, I'll get to that in a second. But if you go inside mobile networks, etc., there's no way to turn it on and off. There's APNs, Again, because you need that now with the SIM and the LTE infrastructure that is basically EU terrain. But there is a way to turn 4G on and off. So if you come in here and you do *#, *4636, which corresponds to info, #*, then you get into sort of the phone testing menu that almost every Android phone has. So right now I'm in the 3G market, but I had it in LTE mode. So as a result, I only have 1x connectivity. Again, that's because the MSM 8655's baseband is always on and connected to 1x. So 1x voice or 1x data all the time. So this essentially sets the preference for the MDM 9600. So by default, it's in CDMA plus LTE EVDO auto. So that gives LTE preference when it sees it, otherwise it connects to EVDO. So 4G and then falls back to 3G. You can optionally just connect to EVDO all the time if you're in a market that you know has no 4G and you don't want to waste an impossibly tiny amount of battery life by searching every like 3 to 5 minutes for 4G. Again, as I showed, basically there's no appreciable difference. So letting it search and leaving it in default mode, if you're in a 3G market, is totally fine. If you're in a 4G market and you don't ever want to hand back over to 3G, and you only want to fall back to 1x, so while I was in Phoenix and I wasn't sort of testing but just using it, if I owned a Thunderbolt, I would leave it in LTE mode if I was in a 4G market. But so essentially you can change and turn off 3G, 4G, etc. have control over it. It's just inside here in phone testing, and this is again always been here on every Android phone, and you can essentially do the same thing on like the Nexus One, for example, and set WCDMA 3G on or preferred, and then use 2G GSM when you're not connected. So that's sort of the same. Nothing's really changed. So let's also show simultaneous 3G voice and data. So right now in my home market we don't have 4G LTE, although it's coming, and as a result I won't have to drive to Phoenix each time, but we can show it. So I'm going to place a test call. So that test call is going. Yeah, it's going in the background. Again, you get the green sort of status indicator up here. We also still get 3G. It hasn't gone away like you'd normally see. And as a result, I can just surf the internet. And it works just fine. There's absolutely no change in data rate or voice quality at all, because again, there's two discrete modems. So as a result, you basically get this simultaneous 3G and 4G data and 1x voice for free. And I think that's going forward going to be something that only the Thunderbolt has. Everybody else will have sort of a situation where you get 4G data and 1x voice simultaneous, but you don't get 3G data and 1x voice simultaneous like you do here. So again, I can load anything I want and it works just fine. Whether this is again a deal breaker for you is sort of philosophical, and I say that because obviously it's not something that you hear lots of Verizon customers complaining about, but it does make a difference. For example, when you have SMSs that you're transacting, I find, for example, extremely annoying when an SMS comes in on a CDMA network and my data context gets paused for 3 to 5 seconds while it exchanges the SMS. And if you're with someone chatty, that can get really frustrating, especially if it's not implementing concatenation right, and there's just like 5 or 6 SMSs coming in. So, as a result, on the Thunderbolt, it's completely survivable because there's no pausing of data. So right now we're in a 4G market up in Phoenix. As you can see at the top, we've got the 4G status indicator. So we're on LTE right now. What I wanted to demonstrate was simultaneous data and calling, and then also some general speed tests. So first let's look at actually making a call while we're transacting data. So I'm going to do is call just a test ASOS number. And so now while that's going, I'm going to just surf the AnandTech homepage.
International Airport, Tucson, Arizona. Automated Zulu. Wind 15.
So we're loading everything over LTE right now while doing a call. So basically the MSM 8655 is supplying the 1X voice connection, and the MDM 9600 is doing LTE. It loads pretty fast, obviously, so we can go to print an article and it'll just load the entire thing instantly. Super fast.
Altimeter 2994. Remarks. Density altitude 2600.
So now what would be ideal, it would be to use speedtests, just a normal app, so we could measure throughput. But unfortunately it gives erroneous results for upstream because it basically just fills the buffer really fast and you don't actually get any measurement. So downstream is a little bit more accurate, but it doesn't quite get up to speed fast enough or run long enough to really show anything representative sometimes. So of course that upstream is just entirely erroneous. It's nowhere near 24 megabits. It's more like an order of magnitude less, so like 2 or 3. Let this run again though. So the 7 megabits down is actually pretty close. I've been seeing 10 here pretty reliably. And again, you can see just from the behavior of it, filling up, kind of pausing, and then starting to do the same thing again, that we're obviously just filling up a transmit buffer. But of course, since we have the internet and flash, you can just use the real speed test on that. So here we are, and it's a little bit difficult to tap around on things, but it totally works. So we'll actually run the test to the local server here, and you can see 6 megabits right there downstream. See finally an accurate measure of upstream, about 1. I've been seeing 1 to 2 right here. There we go. We can run it again. So this works totally fine. It's just a little bit frustrating sometimes to get inaccurate taps inside this little flash menu, but it works just fine actually. So there we go, getting 12 megabits down, 84 ms latency. .3 megabits up, 1.5. So that's pretty reasonable for where I am. I've been seeing similar results. So about 12 down, 1.8 up. So we can also try testmy.net. So 11.5 megabits there, it says. Let's do a retest with upstream now. So looks like around 1 megabit there upstream, 969 kilobits per second. Again, performance is basically the same on the Thunderbolt as we've seen with other single core Snapdragons. It's 45 nanometer, 1 gigahertz. It's got Adreno 205 graphics. It's not dual core, which is a little bit disappointing. But I mean, that's nothing we didn't know going into this. It's just a little bit disappointing considering that we're on the advent of dual core sort of becoming the status quo for the high-end Android phones. One of the other things that HTC did that I think is really admirable is they sort of fixed my complaint of the the fact that previously on their designs, sort of like the Nexus One, there's this plastic layer in between. So as a result, you can get fingerprints and or dirt right here or right here, and then this, there's another layer of just plastic that doesn't add any optical power or anything to the camera in between, and all it just does is add glare. So as a result, on the Thunderbolt and the Inspire, on the Inspire, of course, there's no door that comes off. It's just, a raised camera surface. On the Thunderbolt, the camera surface is non-obstructed. There's no secondary plastic layer, and I think that's the right direction to go by far. One last thing, down here there's a little rubber plug. Underneath that there's an RF testing port. I don't think it's an external connector. It doesn't look like a UFL connector. It looks more like a testing port, and it's really hard to get back out, you know, or back in place perfectly. So I mean, you could pull it off if you want, but basically it's not going to do any good. I think that's about it for the Thunderbolt. Thanks again.